Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, good whatever time of day it is, wherever you are right now. Thank you for tuning in to the Conversations with Dr. Don show. The show is produced and broadcast from the Portland, Oregon area. And for your first-time viewers, Conversations with Dr. Don is an ongoing series of one-hour standalone talk shows where I interview interesting people like most of you out there about who they are as unique, one-of-a-kind individuals. And we'll be talking about the update on the Oregon Progressive Party. So anyhow, the show is broadcast and recorded in two segments. The first segment is the Who Are You segment, where we talk to our guests about who they are personally and all those kinds of things, so they have an idea where you're coming from when you answer questions in the second half of the show. So right now, I will see who will talk to first. Who shall I talk to first?
I guess I'm being volunteered, so.
How are you feeling right now?
Doing good, Dr. Don. How are you doing?
I'm doing well, doing pretty well. And how are you, David?
I'm very well.
David Doak, Jason Kafuri. All right. So if I were to ask your best friend, Jason, who is Jason? What would your best friend say? Jason is, be your best friend.
We asked this question in court. I'm an attorney when I'm not being a political activist, and we always ask all the jurors, who in the world knows you best, and if they were sitting here today, how would they describe you? Mm-hmm. Which is your question in essence to me.
That's legalese.
Yeah. So I would think I would be described as adventurous, high energy, funny, very dedicated to things I believe in, and a generous, kind person.
Mm-hmm. So you said I in there, so you personalized it, didn't you?
Well, I didn't name who would say all those things, but it's probably a combination of different people would say that.
I'm not going to get in this kind of a discussion with you because you're a lawyer. I'll pick you apart. All right. So when and where were you born?
So I'm from Portland, Oregon.
Portland.
Yes, I'm from here, and we call we're the unicorns, right? The people that are actually born here that still live here.
Hello.
So I grew up in the Irvington neighborhood. Back when it was much more diverse and much more both ethnically and economically diverse than it is now. Mm-hmm. Went to Irvington grade school, Fernwood middle school, Grant High School freshman year, and then ended up graduating from Lincoln High School in 1996.
Uh-huh. So, and when was that, your birth?
I was born April 22nd, 1978.
78. You're just a kid.
40 wonderful.
You ready for your trick question?
Always.
Why were you born?
Luck of the draw.
Philosophically blank. Yeah. Religious preference, do you have one, or did you have one before?
Never grew up in a religious family. Maybe there are higher beings, maybe there are spiritual entities out there. Maybe we're just all flesh and blood. I don't know, so I would call myself agnostic if I was to be asked. On my dad's side, my great-grandfather was an Orthodox minister back in Lebanon, because my last name is Lebanese, Kafuri, but if it was still in Lebanon, it would be Kafuri. Because it's Arabic.
Say that again.
Kafuri.
Oh, I love it.
It would be KF instead of KAF. Uh-huh. But when my great-grandfather came through Ellis Island, somehow it became Kafuri. And there's somebody that's done some genealogy out in the Midwest, and there's something like 1,500 Kafuris or Kafuris in the United States.
I'll be darned. Yeah.
And most of them are here in Portland.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I actually learned something interesting the other day. I studied abroad in Brazil, and there are 500,000 roughly American Lebanese. There's 7 million Brazilian Lebanese. So there's a much larger population. And I was down there about a year and a half, 2 years ago, and I met a guy whose wife and whole family were actually Kafuris.
be darned.
So yeah, I
Small
went to
world,
dinner.
isn't
I
it?
went to dinner with a group of Brazilian Kafuris. We had no idea that they even existed.
Did you recognize anybody's facial features as part of
I mean,
Kafori line?
the Lebanese have distinctive traits. The darker eyebrows, darker hair.
Okay. How about the insides? What color are the insides?
I think everybody's the same inside. Is that another trick question?
And you talked a little about your education. And what do you do now full time, so to speak?
So I work with my dad, Greg Kafori. I'm an attorney. Went to law school in New Orleans at Tulane. Yes, I was.
I'm from New Orleans, as you know.
If we had more time, I'd tell you my long, detailed evacuation story from Hurricane Katrina. I was there 1 week for law school in New Orleans, and then boom, the hurricane hit. So I had to evacuate, and I was gone for the whole semester.
You got some good stories? We can crack up another hour.
Another hour on New Orleans stories, yeah. So I graduated law school in 08, and I had a job offer to go to San Diego and work at one of the largest class action law firms doing consumer protection. And I decided to come work with my dad. So I have, for the last 10 years, been an attorney at the law firm Kafori and McDougall. We have 6 lawyers, about 10 staff. I would say we're a medium-sized personal injury, civil rights firm. We represent anybody from a regular motor vehicle car case to people, products liability, civil rights claims, discrimination cases against minority groups. We do some sex abuse cases, big institutional entities that allow sex abusers to hurt people. We represent the victims. So what I describe it as is we always represent people that get either hurt, injured, or wronged against powerful corporations or insurance companies. That's our profession in a nutshell.
You're a professional rescuer, huh?
I mean, the truth is, if you go up against a big corporation or a big insurance company, you don't have a lot of power, and they will grind you down, and they'll offer you very little, especially if you have a larger injury. You should seek out a lawyer.
Sounds like you're a communist. I mean socialist.
I would say I'm helping even the balance field, at least, between the powerful and the people that are the victims. So.
Yeah. And you have a wife, husband, a companion, a pet, anything you want to mention?
I have a cat named Amir. He's actually from the country of Oman. He was brought here as part of the Pixie Project. I don't know what the carbon emissions were to get him here, but he's a beautiful cat. And no, I divorced, so still looking for Miss Right out there in the world. So
Yeah. Well, you announced that to the world out there?
yeah, could be my ticket out there. The Dr. Don Show.
Any children or grandchildren or anything like that?
No kids.
Yeah.
Yet.
And the next question is redundant. A political persuasion? Are you a Trump supporter or what?
I'm a hardcore MAGA, Make America Great Again. Got all the collection at home. No, I grew up in a very progressive political family, and
And the whole family lineage is that way.
yeah, I mean everybody in my family is at least center left, and I would say my dad is more on the activist progressive side of things. He, along with Lloyd Marbett, Dan Meek, and several others, worked tirelessly for years and years to close down the Trojan nuclear power plant.
Yes.
That was 40 miles from Portland, and if it ever had blown up, depending on which way the wind was blowing, we all might have been dead. So, and they succeeded in the early 90s at forcing PGE to close the Trojan nuclear power plant. So,
How are you associated with Ralph Nader?
So I went to Colorado College, and when I graduated college, my dad, when I was growing up, would always say, "You should go work for Ralph Nader," because he had met Ralph and they were friends. Ralph Nader's side of the family's Lebanese also, so we had
Of
that
course.
connection. And I graduated college, and my dad had gotten involved organizing the huge super rallies that Nader did in his 2000 campaign.
Yeah.
Those were amazing. Those were the Bernie super rallies before they were the Bernie super rallies,
yes.
from 2000. So, but my dad and his law partner Mark McDougall, they got the rights to Memorial Coliseum. That was the first super rally. Filled it with 10,000 people back in August 2000, and then they ended up kind of shutting their law practice down for several months and traveling over the country and setting up 10 other big rallies. So I got involved with that, fell in love with doing political organizing, and after the 2000 campaign, I told Ralph, hey, I'd love to come out and work for you in D.C., so I spent 5 years doing political organizing for Nader, and I would travel the country with him, just carrying his bags around because he would stop and do speeches. And I organized with a group called Democracy Rising. Which I always thought was a great name for a nonprofit group. But we would organize huge civic rallies around the country. So I've probably lived in a dozen U.S. cities for at least 3 to 6 weeks, just showing up, not knowing anybody, and having to put on a 5,000-10,000 person event.
Wow, you really know how to do that, don't you?
I wrote a manual. I have a 50-page manual on how to do it. So this was pre-social media organizing.
Pre-social media, I like that. Yeah. And the memberships in political, social, or civic organizations, you probably have a long list of those, or significant ones that your memberships in.
Yeah. So. Obviously, I'm on the state board of the Oregon Progressive Party, which David Delk and I are both members of.
And I'm a member.
And we're all members here. So, I am one of the coordinators for Honest Elections Oregon, which has been fighting for campaign finance reform, which I'm sure we're going to talk more about. And we've had some huge successes, and we got some more battles ahead of us. And I am on the board of Portland Forward, which is a nonprofit organization that is trying to bring together the 70s generation that did a lot of big, exciting things for the city of Portland, combine them multi-generationally with younger folks that are activists that want to change the city, and see if we can move things forward with, for example, which I know we'll talk about a little bit more, but doing a public bank. Having a public bank is one of the key things that the Portland Forward is working towards.
I've got that list here to confirm what you're saying is true.
We'll go over it, I'm sure.
It's a
today,
website,
so.
yeah. From the past or alive today, any persons come to mind that are heroes or people you look up to?
Well, obviously Ralph Nader. Ralph wakes up every day, reads Washington Post, New York Times, and Wall Street Journal, cover to cover for an hour or two, and he has this pencil or pen, and he circles things, and he has a lady who goes and clips out all the articles and then sends them to people around the country for him. That's how he starts his day. So he's one of the smartest people I've ever met. I grew up, reading Che Guevara biographies, so I definitely put Che on the list.
You're going to fall off the other end of the continuum,
Yeah. I love political organizers and activists and people that rock the boat, so to speak, to make change happen in an otherwise stagnant world sometimes.
The Motorcycle Diaries.
I read that one.
That's enough.
The John Anderson biography on Che was, I thought, the best. It's about 700-800 pages. It was quite lengthy, but it was fabulous book.
Shall we forget about David and continue on with you?
David?
Yeah. Let's go over to David. So we've been at this a number of times in the past.
Yes,
but
we have.
Time has gone by, and
I learned a lot about David just on the drive over here.
Because, I don't like to talk about myself too much, so he pried stuff out.
You got a lawyer prying in the
Just asking questions.
David, if I were to ask your best friend, who is David? What would he say? Be him, your best friend. And don't talk about Tom.
Do you know my best friend?
But I'm going to hear about it in a moment.
Well, I have to decide how honest I'm going to be. So if you know my best friend, then I need to be honest.
Me.
Okay,
No.
right, yeah. So I think I think my best friend would probably describe him as quiet, reserved, kind of goes with it, an introvert, but who has learned how to get out of that from time to time.
A lot of it. You've gotten well over it.
No. I constantly struggle with that.
Sure.
Yeah, and I really shouldn't say struggle with it, but I have learned how to work with it.
I will say
right.
David Delk's one of the great signature gatherers of all time. So you can't be
yeah.
that introverted to go walk around and talk to strangers and collect
Excellent.
signatures.
So
He's just,
help me out here. You know, he's elusive, isn't he?
I think he's just dedicated. That's what I think.
Yes, yeah.
And when and where were you born?
I was born in Portland in 1950,
Two Portlanders.
August 6th, 1950.
1950.
Yes.
Do you have a better answer as to why you were born than Jason?
No, Jason's was great.
Bunch of atheists.
Yeah,
That's a pejorative. I mean, atheists. Okay.
In terms of religious preference, my mother was Catholic, but she never went to church, and thankfully, therefore, she never took me to church, and I never attended church. And while I got some of that from her, I never believed any of those stories, and so I generally regard myself as an atheist also. But I do belong to the Unitarian Church, which happily doesn't require you to believe anything.
And you
It has
follow
principles.
the principles there. Right?
Seven principles of Unitarian Universalists.
And your formal education?
Well, I don't know how formal it was, but I went to Shattuck Grade School in Portland, which is now part of Portland State. I was in the last graduating class from Shattuck Grade School,
And then they closed it down.
and then they closed it down. And then I went to Lincoln High School.
A fellow Cardinal.
Yes. Yes. And then I went to Portland State, and I got a BS in sociology and a teaching certificate, but there were no jobs. And so I went in 4 years prior to graduating, and they said, be a teacher, lots of jobs. 4 years later, not a job to be found. So I never did become a teacher. And I went to Eastern Washington State College in a master's program in labor history, but I financially couldn't. I couldn't even handle Eastern Washington State College, and so I never finished that up.
So what'd you do to pay the bills until you retired fairly recently, huh?
Well, actually, it wasn't all that recently. I retired 7 years ago.
7 years ago.
Yeah.
How the time flies.
As soon as my last job was working for what's now Home Forward, was Housing Authority of Portland, and I had it down to the day when I was going to be there for 5 years, and I retired on that day. Well, actually, I retired the day after. You had to be there for at least 5 years, and so I retired the day after. I became eligible for a very small PERS pension, and so that's so anyway. That was my last job. Most of the rest of the time while I was working, I worked for an office furniture / stationery company. There's actually several of them. There was one in Spokane, one in Seattle I worked for, and then two of them here in Portland. In fact, I just because your office is right above Pacific Office Furnishings just got bought. So now there's, not that this matters to anybody except me, now there's only one Herman Miller dealership in the city of Portland, whereas there have always been at least two in the past. So it's a monopoly.
Interesting.
Is that a commercial?
No, it's just a statement of fact.
Yeah.
Right.
So I wonder if you spent as much of your energy in those jobs that you did as you do now in your political activities.
No. In fact, when I worked at Pacific Office Furnishings, it was suggested that I should spend and give as much energy to the job as I did to my political activities then.
So they recognize you.
Yeah,
huh?
yes, all right, yes.
Yeah.
I don't know how they figured that out.
Yeah, persons from the past or alive today besides Ralph Nader who you admire or look up to. Any names come to mind?
Lloyd Marbett. Lloyd Marbett.
Marbett, yeah. Wonderful, wonderful.
Yeah,
man.
yeah, Lloyd Marbett. From
Lloyd
the
Marbett.
70s, he ran initiative campaigns to close Trojan down, and I always admired him. I didn't know him, and I didn't particularly involve myself with those campaigns, but I always admired him, going back and back and back to the ballot, knowing that they were probably going to be defeated, but he kept going back.
Kept going back.
Persistence, very important trait.
Say one or two words about Trojan. You mentioned that, but Trojan.
Yeah, well, Trojan was the only nuclear plant that was built in the state of Oregon. It was built by Portland General Electric. I don't know too much of the early part. Actually, I'm much more familiar with it after Lloyd Marbett started wanting to close it down, and I started learning about nuclear power and the dangers. Why would you put that right on a river? Well, there's actually good reasons to put it right on a river, but not from a safety standpoint.
Cooling.
So Lloyd ran these initiative campaigns. I think he did 3 or 4 of them.
They did 3 signature efforts. I'm
3,
sure, yeah.
okay, yeah. And at the ballot, each one of them was defeated because PGE had lots of money to throw at it, and so they were each of them defeated. The last one, PGE spent, I don't know the exact figure, but I'm going to say $1 million to $1.5 million to defeat it, which was a huge amount of money. I mean, it's still a huge amount of money, but it was really a huge amount of money then, only to close it down within a year after they defeated the initiative, because the pipes were bursting. And so they finally realized, oh, maybe it's time to close it down. Maybe Lloyd Marbett was right all along.
Aren't the pipes still bursting?
No, Trojan doesn't exist.
They decommissioned the plant. Remember they had that big moment where they blew up the
Right, yes.
the cooling tower. Yeah.
Right, yeah.
So other than Lloyd Marbett, any other names come to mind?
Well, Gene McCarthy.
Gene McCarthy.
Yeah.
Socialist.
Thank you. I don't know that he was, but Gene McCarthy, most people won't remember Gene McCarthy, but when I was 18, Gene McCarthy ran for president, and he was the peace candidate, and that would have been
72?
72, right?
Have you always been a tree hugger?
I didn't say anything about being a tree hugger, but yes, yes, I have.
Not figurative.
Well, you know,
literally
it's for
figurative.
McCarthy is always who they cite as to why Bernie or Elizabeth couldn't win.
Really?
That's what I hear, yeah,
Oh,
in the mainstream
oh,
media.
oh,
Oh,
okay.
why, look what happened with McCarthy.
Oh, yeah. Well, he was one of those people, an older man like Bernie, who really ignited young people with his message of peace and getting out of the Vietnam War and bringing our troops home where they belonged in the first place. And so I was 18. I worked for his campaign, and like I was telling Jason on the ride over here, the only thing I ever remember my mother doing that was political was going to a Gene McCarthy rally, and she went with me. I was quite proud of her.
What do you think of Jesus?
Well, I think that he has a lot of wisdom, and he engaged in a lot of activist kinds of activities while he was walking around the earth. A very excellent role model. And so I hope that people will actually learn something about him and learn from him. And
I'm going to stop this line of questioning because
Yes.
I got the same kinds of answers. You're a confirmed, convicted leftist from way back.
Yes, just like Jesus was. The most memorable story about Jesus is when he goes to the temple and he throws the money lenders, money changers out. Wonderful story. Right.
Okay. What is doing good? What is that? Doing good.
What is doing good?
Yes. And we'd ask Jason answer that too.
Doing good is, well, in part it can be defined as what does the least harm or no harm to other human beings and to the earth.
Yeah, I mean, I think if you think of us as human beings on this earth, to me, doing good is how are we lifting and helping all of humanity to have as healthy and as fun-filled life as possible. And I don't think that the structure of huge corporations generally leads to good outcomes for human beings. So that's where you need a strong central government to control, more corporate capitalist influences.
You know what he said? Yeah, what he said.
All right, looks like it's about half through our hour, so let's take a break. Oh, we're back. Thanks for staying tuned. And for you viewers who missed the opening of the show, Conversations with Dr. Don is an ongoing series of 1-hour standalone talk shows where I interview interesting people like most of you out there about who they are as unique, one-of-a-kind individuals and about what we've decided to talk about tonight. We're talking about an update on the Oregon Progressive Party 2019, and our guests this evening are Jason Kafuri to my right, and across from me is David Delk, and you'll learn a little about them personally and why they'll be saying the things that they're saying in the second half of the show. And the Oregon Progressive Party update. Let's start off with this cheat question here. What is the brief history of the Oregon Progressive Party? Who will handle that?
I can jump first at that one. So I used to run Ralph Nader's field and his national campaign in 04 and in 08. And if people remember 04, the Democratic Party went to extreme efforts to keep him off the ballot here in Oregon. They went to our conventions and flooded with people to not vote to put him on the ballot, and they filed lawsuits against us, sabotaging our signature efforts. So we ended up not getting on the ballot in 04, which led in 2008 to an effort to get us on in Oregon. But we decided to create our own political party, but not indicate what we were going to do in terms of nominations. So it would be under the radar. So we went and collected tens of thousands of signatures, and we created the Oregon Peace Party. You got to remember back in 07, 08 range, that was really some of the height of the war in Afghanistan and Iraq. So, and it was the tail end of Bush, and people were really tired of foreign interventional military campaigns. So we thought the Oregon Peace Party at that point made a lot of sense for a political party's name. But as we all know, at the end of 08's campaign, the economy crashed. And we went through the Great Recession. So we stepped back as political party leaders and said, we should probably come up with a name that hits beyond just, a peace or an international political party. We should look at something that was broader and also hit on a lot of the economic inequalities that were laid bare during the recession. So that's where we went back in time and found the Progressive Party, which of course had, back from Roosevelt in the early 20th century, a history here. We resurrected the buffalo, or we are, they got the elephant and the donkey, so we went with the buffalo for our political party animal, and we have been the Oregon Progressive Party ever since. We're a small, nimble, agile political party led by a state steering committee of what I think 7 people it helps run the party and make the party decisions, and we have somewhere in the neighborhood of 2,500 to 3,000 registered members somewhere statewide. So
And growing.
Yes.
Yes, we are growing.
How do you keep the money that lets you operate?
Well, we get donations from citizens. One of the best ways is the $50 tax credit. Every citizen has the ability on their tax return to get a free $50 for a political effort. So we tend to get hundreds, sometimes thousands of dollars from people just on their taxes. And beyond that, we raise money within the party, and we've done fundraisers. We've held various events. But it's like any sort of minor third party. It's not easy to raise money.
So how about your law firm?
My law firm has donated some money over time, and we also donate our space. We have our monthly meetings at my law firm, Kafori McDougall.
That's in downtown Portland.
Downtown Portland. If anyone ever wants to come join us for the Oregon Progressive Party meeting, it is 7 to 9 p.m. every third Wednesday, and you can get the details. Every third Monday. Every third Monday, and you get the details at progparty.org. P-R-O-G. Progparty.org.
There it is on the screen right now. All right. So I asked David for some questions for me to ask so that he can facilitate the conversation between us here. Okay. So I have a list of 7 of them. We'll take them in order. The first one is the question: elections are coming up. Is the Progressive Party looking for candidates, or does it already have candidates running? What races? Who are the candidates? There's a lot of questions there.
Yeah, so we're always looking for candidates. We have on the website, we have some candidate questionnaires. And we have had some candidates come to our meetings and go through, answer the questionnaires and answer our questions in person. So we had, I'm sorry, help me.
Oh, we've had at least 5 or 6 candidates come through.
Yes.
This is a little early. Late
2020.
Yeah, where you'll see a lot more candidates come to the surface is closer to the May primary and then over the summer. We don't have to give our candidate nominations to the Secretary of State until either late July or August. So we tend to vote on most of our endorsements and most of our nominations over the summer of an election year.
Yeah. So we had Mark Gamba, who was running for Congress against Kurt Schrader, which we endorsed him already. There was a woman who was running against Bonamici. She, I'm forgetting her name. Sorry, I apologize to her. She is an advocate for disabled people, and she is disabled herself, and so she wants to bring an actual non-veteran disabled person's voice to Congress.
Yeah, in general, the 2 major parties have set up a system where we have to run someone and have them statewide get at least 1% of the vote every couple cycles. And if we don't do that, we lose our entire political party. It just gets wiped clean. So we didn't set this system up But a lot of people complain about, oh, why are you running, statewide as a political party? Because frankly, we have to, and that these aren't the rules that we created. These are the rules that the two major parties created. So we will be running someone and probably a couple people for statewide races next year in the November 2020 election.
Sounds like a Sisyphus sort of a situation. You keep going, and you fall back down again. And how long are you going to be alive to see if the Progressive Party is going to achieve some degree of notoriety like the Republicans or Democratic parties?
Well, the system is rigged for third parties. People in our country are hereditary Republicans or hereditary Democrats, meaning all their family were Democrats or all their family were Republicans. There has been a huge upsurge, as we've seen in the last 10 or 20 years, in people registering independent or non-affiliated. But it's a lot harder to get people to register for a political party than it is to have them register as non-affiliates or independent. To me, the role of a third party is not necessarily to win races. Great if you can, if you have a strong candidate who can win a race. But the goal of a third party is to push the two major parties in a more progressive position on issues. That's how I've always felt about third parties, and that's why I support third parties generally. Because, a great example of this, obviously we were talking earlier about how I worked with Ralph Nader. If you look at Ralph Nader's agenda in 2000, it is almost a clone of the agenda of Bernie Sanders, right? And Ralph Nader did that outside the political spectrum. Al Gore, Kerry, even Obama in 2008, we're not talking the Bernie Sanders, Elizabeth Warren agenda. That is something that Nader was pushing. And people would ask him, why are you running for office? Why are you doing this outside the two major parties? He said, if you don't go within the electoral arena from the outside and push the progressive agenda will fail and lose over time. And if you look at where we are now, the left of the Democratic Party is where Nader was 15, 20 years ago.
Is it going to be successful this time in 2020? The left of the center of the Democratic Party, Elizabeth Warren, for example, and a few of those kinds of people from the left side of the political continuum, or shall we keep trying and trying again and to overthrow the monopoly capitalist system?
I think one of those two people, either Warren or Sanders, has to be the Democratic Party nominee. Otherwise, the Democrats will lose.
What about the woman who ran for governor in Georgia, and she's decided to not run for the presidential race because she's holding out to be nominated for a vice presidential candidate?
Stacey Abrams, yeah.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Okay, yeah. She's, go ahead.
Well, it's nice to say I'm not going to run for president because I want you to pick me to be your VP. But ultimately it depends on who wins, whether it's Sanders or Elizabeth or Biden or somebody else. So I will say this: you asked who's going to win. I don't have a crystal ball right now, but all the candidates have some flaws, and to me, Biden is the weakest of the major candidates.
Baggage.
Yeah, he just, he's been in the system for 40 years. He's, frankly, sounds somewhat senile when he's talking, and he doesn't excite anybody. He doesn't get anybody jazzed. There's not people out there saying, "Gosh darn it, I'm going to go." To the barracks for Joe Biden there, and that's what wins campaigns is the energy, the frenzy that gets people to go on cold nights in the middle of winter to caucuses in faraway cities and push to get their candidate elected. So, I think right now you're going to see the establishment on the Democratic Party, the DNC types. They're going to try to crush Warren and Sanders, and led also by the corporate media. I mean, the corporate media, they already ignore Sanders extensively, and with Elizabeth, you're starting to see them going after her a lot more in the last month or so, and as are the billionaire class. I mean, you've seen a lot of billionaires come out recently, sounding scared that they might actually be challenged. So it's a fascinating race.
Yeah, and talk about the billionaires. You got Tom Sire,
yeah.
who's advertising on ABC, NBC, CBS, and you have Michael Bloomberg, former mayor of New York City, who is putting his hand in the ring because he doesn't think that the Democrats have a winning candidate, and he wants to put himself up. I think that democracy demands that we have candidates other than billionaires. I think it's Warren that, or no, it's Sanders.
We already have
that
a fake billionaire in charge.
Yeah, we should have learned. Yeah.
Wow,
Yeah, and I
you're
think
opening a whole can of worms here. Are we going to get to see Trump's tax returns?
That's hard to say.
I think when it comes down to the wire, he's going to resign rather than be exposed.
That's another crystal ball. I have no idea.
Yeah.
But I think Trump. It will need to be an election that he is beaten pretty badly. If it's really, really close, I don't see him just handing over power. It's scary to think about that, but I think he's going to call it a fraudulent election, and you're going to see a constitutional crisis. That's
who is his propaganda minister? His Goebbels.
He's had a lot of them over the years. They started with Steve Bannon and that crew.
Steve Bannon.
Yeah, then the alt-right nationalists. Who are his folks? He's Giuliani, Mulvaney. He's got several sycophants that do whatever he says. Basically, Barr is close to one of those. He's holding himself back slightly in judiciary, but it's a scary time for American democracy. It really is, and I think I'm scared about the voting machines. I'm scared about the hacking. I'm scared about it all.
Do we really have a democracy in America nowadays? Some semblance of features of a democracy, such working under the rubric of the two political parties.
It's a lot healthier democracy than many places around the world. But I have serious misgivings about the disinformation that's being spewed right now online that is, leading people to have crazy conspiracy theories.
But nobody mentioned anybody of the stature of Goebbels in the Trump entourage. You mentioned a few names, but nobody has a sticking quality.
Well, it's because he kicks everybody out within the 6 months to a year. It's amazing how I've never seen anybody demand loyalty more, but yet provide loyalty less to people around him. It's stunning.
Does he have a personality disorder?
Absolutely. He's
like David?
Narcissistic. Complete opposite of David Dell. David's a saint in comparison to the man in the White House.
Yeah. So let's continue on.
Sorry, we got sidetracked there on national politics. But
Yeah.
Easy to do this time of year.
The questions. What kind of questions are you asking candidates seeking your endorsement? What kind of questions are you asking them?
David, you helped draft the documents.
So we have a whole slew of things that concern us. One of them, obviously, the thing that we talk about most is money in politics. And so one of the questions always is, depending on what level of government you're running at, if you're running at a local level, then we're asking, do you support, or did you vote for or against the two measures that we had on the ballot in Portland and in Multnomah County to establish limits on campaign contributions.
Sort of a screening.
It's yes, right, yeah. And then we would also ask, do you support public funding? And the process that has been enacted in Portland.
About ranked choice voting?
We don't have a question, and we should have a question on ranked choice voting.
You said New York City just passed it.
Yes.
Yes,
Right,
yes.
Yeah.
It'd be interesting to see how that works. Ralph Nader always used to say, well, let's see how, does IRV actually lead to more progressive candidates winning? And we're seeing it in a lot more places. So I think we're going to have more data to gather on IRV in the coming cycles.
Yeah, and so New York City just passed it, but San Francisco has had it for 6 or 8 years, so they've
Yes.
used it. And we haven't heard any, scandals or anything that suggests that it doesn't work. And because the powers that be are so opposed to it, we would certainly hear that.
We do ranked choice things all the time. I mean, all the time in life you say, that's my first choice, but it's like a sports team, right? Like, I like this guy's the best, but my second favorite team is this. There's no reason you shouldn't be able to do that for politics.
Yeah, and having that would be a big way of undermining the two-party system, which is dedicated to only giving you 2 choices, usually choices you don't really want to make.
Yeah.
All right. What has the Progressive Party been focused on? We're talking about a number of things that they're focused on. And for me right now, it seems like the ranked choice voting is the most important to change the system. But then how are you going to do something about the media, the print media or the propaganda media?
Well, okay, I don't think IRV solves the problem of big money controlling our political system. So let's just start with that. I mean, unless you have, I think the healthiest system for politics is a place where you have limits on how much people can give, number one. Number two, you have people that do give larger amounts have to be disclosed, and that could be independent expenditures or within, direct donations. So disclosures, limits, and then I think that putting some sort of a ban or a cap on independent expenditures. We can't do that right now with Citizens United. I think in an ideal world, you would be able to say, you can't just spend, because you're a billionaire, $5 million on this race to try to influence it. I think there should be limits on that. And then fourth, having a healthy public funding system. That is if you want to level the playing field out there, getting rid of big money from having too much influence and letting somebody get public funding to be able to have their voice get out and not have to go dial for dollars. I think that is the system that would be ideal for politics to be played in.
You mentioned Citizens United.
I didn't mention it, but what I said was we can't stop it because of Citizens United. Yeah.
And say a few words about Citizens United, that decision.
Right, 2010, U.S. Supreme Court said it was independent expenditures in the I think it was from the 2008 election, if I remember correctly, and the McCain-Feingold was in place at that point, and it had a ban which said you couldn't spend money within 60 days of an election as an outsider group, something like that. I don't want to be quoted exactly on it, but
sure.
And Citizens United was a right-wing group that wanted to run ads within that time window, so they challenged that. And the U.S. Supreme Court came out and said, well, not only can you run ads during those 60 days, but in fact, we're going to put no limits at all on how much a independent expenditure can spend. Mm-hmm. So that's the dark money. That's the guy who...
Money is speech.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yep. So, but one of the creative things we've done with the Oregon Progressive Party taking the lead on this to some extent is the Multnomah County and the city of Portland. We have really detailed disclosure requirements. Now the county just that last week passed an ordinance to implement that. We have really detailed accounting that says, all right, if you're going to give big money, you can't just hide in your ranch in Nevada and spend $1 million on an Oregon race. You need to put your name is going to be front and center on all the advertising. It needs to say paid for by Joe Smith, Nevada rancher, or whatever else identifies you. And that I think that's a game changer. California's had pretty good disclosure laws for a long time, since the 70s. The state of Washington just implemented very good disclosure laws. And if you haven't noticed, Oregon and Washington do a lot more progressive stuff, because we here in Oregon are one of 5 states with no limits of money, money in politics at all. I mean, a person in Oregon can give unlimited money. That's why Phil Knight gave $3.5 million in direct donations to Newt Bueller running for Republican governor. So it's crazy.
Well,
So let me just, for our audience who may not know what an independent expenditure is. Independent expenditure is something that is money which is spent, which is not coordinated with the candidate themselves.
Right.
And the Citizens United decision said that corporations could make those kinds of expenditures, and that there was no way that you could ban them. Did not say that we couldn't regulate them. The problem was that prior to that decision, there had been a complete ban on corporate involvement in candidate elections. And so the Citizens United decision took that situation and said you can't ban them. Well, because there was a ban, there were no limits in place. So what should have happened is that the democratically controlled Congress and the Democratic President, Obama, should have put themselves, should have gotten themselves organized and passed those limits. And they failed to do that. And there's speculation that they failed to do that because they thought that they could actually benefit from that situation.
so money is not speech, and so on.
And so on. Yeah.
Well, it's interesting. The ACLU has not been a friend of campaign finance reform, but to their credit, the Oregon ACLU actually joined in our Supreme Court. Right now, the measure 26-184 that we passed with 89% of the vote in the county of Multnomah, that is actually going to be argued this Thursday, November 14th, at the Oregon Supreme Court. And the ACLU, who historically said that putting limits on money in politics was a violation of people's free speech,
Yes.
they have reversed that position, at least here in Oregon, and are now saying that due to the undue influence of big money, they don't believe that putting a limit on how much people can donate is a violation of people's constitutional free speech, which is huge. It's a huge transition.
Yep.
Wow. Well, we're running out of time closely. Yeah.
Let me say something else that, in terms of questions that we ask candidates.
Of course.
We ask candidates if they support public banking.
Oh, yeah.
Big question. Unfortunately, I think a lot of candidates really have no idea what public banking is, don't really know how to answer the question. But public banking is a process in which we stop depositing public funds to Wall Street banks and create a bank ourselves in which we can, in which we gain control of the money that we actually have.
That's in
as a
some place
city or
going on
county.
now, isn't it? Public banking?
Yes. So very recently.
National movement.
Yeah, very, very recently. Well, the Bank of North Dakota
Yes.
has been the only public bank in the United States, and they've been in existence for over 100 years. Very, very successful. And they partner with local credit unions and community banks in order to develop the economy. And we want to do that in the city of Portland. Very recently, the state of California passed a law which allows the formation of public banks in the state of California. We now have 2 states in the United States, plus America Samoa, which either have or will have public banks. Very big deal.
The one thing I just want to add on public banks, I think people don't quite understand the consolidation of banking over the last 30 years. I saw this amazing graph, and it was basically like 35 or 40 major banks from 30 years ago, and they all have merged into the big five now, right? So, we got the Wells Fargos and the Chases and the Goldman and the Wells Fargo and all these guys. So we've got five, big banks.
Yeah.
And why do the taxpayer dollars from all of our taxpayers in the city of Portland, why do we put all that money into Wells Fargo to just pay, millions and millions and millions of dollars in fees to Wells Fargo to watch our money? And that is a concept that when you talk to an average person, they all say, yeah, why do we put our money there, right? So I'm excited about this as a long-term political movement to regain our resources for the public trust and for the public benefit.
Yes, and we're going to need to stop because they're going to yell at me in a minute. It's close to time for us to stop and say goodnight. But in the meantime, let's talk to the viewers about what's going on here this evening and summarizing anything else, or anything else that would be of value to them as voting citizens here. So Jason, you want to talk to that camera?
Sure. This has been, thanks to Dr. Don, having David Delk and I on to discuss the Oregon Progressive Party. We're a minor party here in Portland, Oregon, well, statewide, but most of us live here in the Portland area, dedicated to fighting for a progressive political agenda. You can find out more about us at Prog Party, P-R-O-G, party.org. We are leaders in fighting to get big money out of politics, leaders, as David was just pointing out, about fighting for a public bank. And if you go to our website, you'll see here's where all the Democrats and Republicans are on a lot of issues, and here is where the Progressive Party is, and we'd love to have people join us.
David, say something.
So joining the party is really would be a big benefit to us, and we think it would be a big benefit to you. Some of the other things that we support are public or health care for all people, irrespective of why you're here. And it needs to be affordable, and so that's something that we support, one of our other major positions.
Wow, this has been terrific. You guys have been really wonderful.
Thank you, Dr. Don, for having us.
Yeah.
So it's time to say, thanks for watching. And remember, KFC, not Kentucky Fried Chicken, Dr. Don's KFC. Kind, friendly, and charitable. Be kind, and be friendly, and be charitable to you too. And you too. So, thank you. And